In our headlines on this Friday, March 7th, here in South Korea, the Seoul Central District Court cancels President Yoon Suk-yeol's arrest warrant, effectively releasing him from custody after his detainment in mid-January on charges of insurrection for a short-lived martial law last December. Meanwhile, amid concerns of being sidelined from efforts to address the threats posed by North Korea, South Korea's National Security Advisor Shin says Seoul and Washington will hold close consultations prior to any engagement with Pyongyang. And back on the local front, the Education Ministry says next year's medical school admission quota will be capped at 3,058 if all doctors in training end their walkout from hospitals and boycott classes. That began well over a year ago amid government plans to expand medical school seats. We start with news of the Seoul Central District Court cancelling President Yoon Suk-yeol's detainment on charges of insurrection earlier this afternoon. The president's legal team last month made a formal request to this end, asserting that prosecutors had indicted the president a day after the detention period had expired on January 25th, rendering the arrest warrant illegal. Accordingly, the court's ruling on this Friday effectively paves the path for President Yoon's release if the prosecution either waives its right of appeal or fails to file it within the set time frame. Over in the U.S., South Korean National Security Advisor Shin says Seoul and Washington will hold close consultations prior to any engagement with Pyongyang. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon reports.
National Security Advisor Shin says the U.S. will consult with South Korea before dealing with North Korea amid concerns over U.S. President Donald Trump speaking directly to Kim Jong-un. This came as Shin met with his U.S. counterpart Michael Waltz for the first time on Thursday in Washington, D.C. local time and discussed the bilateral relationship.
We agreed to closely coordinate in advance on the formulation and implementation of North Korea policy.
In addition, Shin also said the two reaffirmed their commitment to the complete denuclearization of North Korea and the importance of the ROK-US alliance during their first in-person meeting. Meanwhile, Shin's visit follows Trump's address to Congress this week, where Trump claimed that South Korea is putting more tariffs on U.S. goods.
South Korea's average tariff is 4 times higher. Think of that, 4 times higher.
Shin says this was also discussed and worked out between the two sides. He called the situation a, quote, misunderstanding, and it has been resolved.
We provided a thorough explanation of our U.S. implementation tariffs under the Korea-U.S. FTA, and the U.S. side expressed its understanding.
A free trade agreement between the two nations leaves essentially no tariffs on U.S. goods imported into South Korea, is what Shin tried to explain to his U.S. counterpart. Shin also visited the U.S. Congress. He met with the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Roger Wicker, and requested support for Korea's involvement with shipbuilding in the U.S. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
And one day after announcing a month-long exemption for auto bills from the 25% U.S. tariffs on Canada and Mexico, the Trump administration on Thursday expanded the list of imports from the two countries eligible for the brief exemption. Our Yoon has details.
U.S. President Donald Trump has granted temporary tariff exemptions for Mexico and Canada on some goods that are covered by an existing trade agreement between the three nations until April 2nd. This partly reverses the 25% tariffs he had imposed just a few days earlier.
It's just a modification short term because I didn't want to hurt the American. It would have hurt the American car companies if I did that.
Thursday's action also comes just a day after Trump decided to grant a 1-month tariff exemption on cars imported from Mexico and Canada. His tariff plans, which went into effect on March 4th, sparked widespread fears about their economic impact. Trump pointed to a failure to deal with the trafficking of drugs, particularly fentanyl, into the U.S. as a reason. A White House official expressed hope that Mexico and Canada will make enough progress on the fentanyl issue so that the matter can be removed from the agenda, allowing the U.S. to move forward with discussions on reciprocal tariffs.
Also, we discussed drugs. and they've been working much harder lately. Do you notice that? On people coming in and drugs, and we've made tremendous progress on both.
Following Thursday's measures, Mexico said it would continue cooperating, including solving drug trafficking issues. And Canadian Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc announced on social media that Canada would pause the second round of retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods, worth nearly $90 billion. However, senior officials say Canada's initial retaliatory tariff of 25% on around $20 billion worth of U.S. goods remains in place, which came into effect on Tuesday. Trump's reciprocal tariffs will be implemented on April 2nd for countries that charge import taxes on U.S. goods. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum said Mexico should be spared when such reciprocal tariffs come into effect, while the Canadian Prime Minister aims for the full removal of all tariffs. Despite efforts to reduce some tariffs, U.S. stock markets continued their recent decline on Thursday, with investors worried about the quick changes in tariffs and the uncertainty they're causing. Ga-hee, Arirang News.
In other news, the Palestinian militant group Hamas has threatened the lives of the remaining hostages in response to U.S. President Donald Trump's ultimatum issued on Wednesday. The group's spokesperson Abu Obaida on Thursday warned that an escalation in Israeli aggression in Gaza will, quote, most likely result in the killing of some hostages. The warning follows a long post on social media by Mr. Trump calling on Hamas to release all remaining hostages or to face death. Hamas, for its part, has accused Israel of, quote, bullying, stalling and reckless aggression. Meanwhile, peace talks for Ukraine amid Russian aggression will take place in Saudi Arabia next week. Now, this is according to President Volodymyr Zelenskyy in a recent post on his social media platform. Our Yi Sun-shin has the latest.
After the fallout from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's visit to the White House for talks with U.S. President Donald Trump last week, talks on a possible ceasefire for the over 3-year-long war will resume in Saudi Arabia. President Zelenskyy took to X on Thursday to announce that he will be visiting to meet Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He added that after the meeting, he and a delegation of senior Ukrainian officials will meet with senior U.S. officials in the Middle Eastern country to continue talks on ending the Ukraine war. U.S. Special Envoy for the Middle East Steve Witkoff also told reporters earlier in the day at the White House that Washington is currently coordinating talks with Kyiv, adding that the goal is to establish the basic framework for a peace agreement and an initial ceasefire agreement.
And from that, we're now in discussions to coordinate a meeting with the Ukrainians in Riyadh or even potentially Jeddah. So the city's moving around a little bit, but it will be Saudi Arabia. And I think the idea is to get down a framework for a peace agreement and an initial ceasefire as well.
Meanwhile, UK officials say that around 20 countries are interested in joining a coalition to help Ukraine. The plan, which is led by the UK and France, also seeks to help Ukraine in upholding any future ceasefire agreement. Not all countries involved would necessarily send troops, but could provide other support. France is also scheduled to hold a meeting next week with military chiefs of staff from European countries that are ready to provide post-war military support to Ukraine. A senior European diplomat told Reuters earlier this week that a Ukrainian peace plan being pursued by Britain and France is likely to be drawn up in days. Yi Sun-shin, Arirang News.
The Polish president has voiced hopes for swift progress in finalizing a deal with South Korea for the purchase of K2 battle tanks. Remarks to this end were shared by President Andrzej Duda during a meeting with Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol in Warsaw on Thursday. Back in August 2022, the two countries inked a contract worth nearly $3.4 billion, with Seoul set to deliver 180 K2 battle tanks to Poland. The two countries are now working to finalize a deal under which South Korea will export 820 additional battle tanks to Poland. The admission quota at South Korean medical schools next year will be capped at 3,058 seats if all medical students currently on strike return to the campuses or hospitals. Our Choi Soo-young reports.
Next year's new enrollment for medical schools in South Korea will be returned to their previous levels. The government announced on Friday that if medical students on leave of absence return by the end of March, there'll be no enrollment increase.
If all students return by the end of March, the 2026 enrollment will respect the university president's autonomy based on the Medical School Deans Association's recommendation.
The Ministry of Education clarified that the full return applies to all students except those on leave for unavoidable reasons such as military service, pregnancy, and childcare or illness. It added that the 2026 enrollment would be set at the increased number of 5,058 students if medical students do not return and normal classes are disrupted. The presidents of 40 universities with medical schools submitted the proposal on Thursday, restoring enrollment numbers to the previous levels, and the government accepted it. If the students return, universities will change the 2026 medical school enrollment to 3,058 students. This decision seems to have been made due to a trend where even new students enrolled this year, following last year's example, are taking a leave of absence. In February last year, the government announced plans to increase the 2025 medical school enrollment quota by 2,000. Around 10,000 residents from training hospitals and medical students nationwide walked out to protest the plan. As first-year medical students from last year took a leave of absence, this year's classes, including new students, are expected to reach up to around 7,500. The Education Ministry will review various first-year class models proposed by the Korea Association of Medical Colleges, such as retaking courses, summer and winter sessions, flexibility in the medical licensing exam, and support for universities if needed. It also stated that strict measures will be applied if students do not return despite these efforts. Choi Soo-young, Arirang News.
Also on the local front, Korea's current account surplus shrank substantially on month in January amid weaker exports. Our correspondent Moon Hye-ryun covers the latest findings.
South Korea's current account scraped a surplus for the first month of the year due to fewer working days with the national's Seollal holiday to celebrate Lunar New Year. According to data released by the Bank of Korea on Friday, the country posted a $2.94 billion current account surplus in January to mark 21 months of the account being in the black. Compared to the month before, however, this is a significant decrease, with the current account logging a more than $12 billion surplus in December. The slowdown comes as a result of 4 fewer working days in January than the year before, as the goods account surplus came to just $2.5 billion. Exports saw a downturn for the first time since September 2023, falling by more than 9% year-on-year. While IT exports such as computers and semiconductors continue to boom, non-IT products such as petroleum products and automobiles saw a decline in exports. Although the central bank expects overall growth in exports throughout the year, with February's export data from the Trade Ministry showing promising signs, uncertainties lie ahead with the Trump administration's new tariff policies.
Conflicts and negotiations between countries are not determined immediately, and it's an ongoing situation, so there are growing uncertainties. The U.S. government's tariff policies are expected to, directly and indirectly, affect our exports alongside the deterioration of the global trade environment. And as discussed in our economic outlook last month, it's clear that it will play a role in slowing exports.
The central bank explains that there could be a negative impact on South Korea's exports if domestic firms respond to increased tariffs, such as the upcoming 25% tariffs on steel and aluminium, by expanding production in the U.S. And with additional U.S. tariffs on China, some of the country's export products could face competition from Chinese goods should Beijing choose to expand its exports to other countries. Imports also dropped by more than 6% as inbound shipments of coal, gas and crude oil fell.
Other than the goods balance, the services balance too recorded a deficit amounting to just over $2 billion, primarily owing to increased overseas travel with the long 설날 holiday. 문혜련, Arirang News.
And the station you're watching, Arirang TV, has signed a memorandum of understanding with the Seoul Arts Center aimed at offering audiences worldwide greater access to Korea's theatrical productions. Accordingly, starting this year, Arirang TV will broadcast select performances at the Seoul Arts Center globally with translation and subtitle services to broaden the reach of Korea's arts and culture. An American comic book artist has taken it upon himself to raise greater awareness about a Korean military hero. Our Jin covers his story.
History comics aren't entirely new, but what can be astonishing is comics about history from a complete foreigner. Onrie Kompan is an American comic book writer who has been creating comics on Admiral Yi Sun-shin, one of South Korea's greatest naval leaders, for nearly 20 years. What inspired him to create these was the drama Immortal Admiral Yi Sun-shin back in 2004.
I see Yi Sun-shin as a worldwide hero, and I want the world to embrace him that way. And, I want Korean people to be proud of that. I wanted to keep it as real and grounded as possible. So there's no fantasy, there's no magic, there's none of that. Everything is based on what actually happened and based on facts.
When he first started his series nearly 20 years ago, K-pop or Korean food was still unheard of for most of those abroad.
I didn't have any doubts, but everyone around me did. I was traveling to Korea and doing all this research and really investing all of myself into this. Especially in the first few years, it was very challenging.
The trilogy is divided into battles Admiral Yi Sun-shin participated in, starting from the Battle of Hansan Island to the Battle of Pyongyang and ending with the Battle of Noryang. He said he's working on the last 2 issues of the series. The comics artist has gone to more than 100 comics conventions in the US and sold 250,000 copies.
And one of the things that has been really gratifying for me is that I've seen a lot of that happen. There have been feature films made based on Yi Sun-shin that was inspired by our work, documentaries, YouTube videos and all kinds of stuff. And it's really wonderful. I'm really happy that we have kind of gotten this ball rolling.
Though he's come so far in his accomplishments, he wants to branch out more and sell more than 1 million copies. He also wants to reach out to Korean audiences to make sure that the Korean people take pride in their history. But it's not only that.
And there's still much work to do with everything, because my goal, of course, is to make Admiral Yi a worldwide recognized hero.
With efforts from Onrie and his creative team of artists and editors, comics can further come into the light and raise awareness of Korean history as well. Jin, Arirang News.
In our interview segment today, we turn the spotlight to a pair of Korean creators of a children's picture book that was recently acknowledged internationally. Our culture correspondent Song Jin files this report.
If you want to eat a red apple, what would you do? This simple question led to Korea's first top honor in the Opera Prima category at the Bologna Ragazzi Awards, one of the most prestigious international honors in picture books. Authors Jin Joo and Ga-hee broke new ground with their book, If You Want to Eat a Red Apple.
It was almost midnight and I was on a Zoom call about my next book. I saw the email and went, wait a minute. Then I just burst out cheering. It was unbelievable.
I had heard of the award before, but didn't realize how big it was. My publisher called asking, aren't you happy? At first, I was just stunned.
Jin, the writer, and Lee, the illustrator, proved to be a match made in heaven, right from their very first book together. The Opera Prima category recognizes the debut works of either the author or the illustrator. While this is Jin's third book, it's Lee's first. The two teamed up after Jin came across Lee's photos of her children on social media. Jigu and Jiho, the apples of her eye, became the main characters of the book.
Their personalities matched the story so well that I wondered if she wrote it with them in mind. I didn't stage every shot, but after hearing the story a few times, they naturally played along.
In the book, the two very different siblings share this goal: to taste the first apple from a tree planted by their grandfather. Ji-gu, the older brother, is observant, taking in everything and everyone around him. Ji-ho, on the other hand, charges straight ahead once he sets his goal.
I once thought I should just live for me now. But through this book, I realized that caring for others is what makes me, my red apple. For those feeling lost, I hope they remind themselves they're doing just fine. For young readers, I hope they cherish their differences, grow together, and one day share their red apples.
The duo also push boundaries with their creative process, from using photos instead of illustrations to typography.
Film photography has a raw painterly quality. To keep that analog feel, I cut out shapes by hand, layering them onto the photos to create a storybook-like world. With my design background, I wanted the text and images to blend seamlessly like a poster, so I created fonts as well.
Now, in their brightest spotlight yet, the authors hope to share the light.
I hope us winning this award gives strength and confidence to other emerging authors and illustrators on the same path. To readers, I humbly ask them to take a moment to notice these quieter voices shining like fireflies.
Just as it takes two to tango, a picture book is a dance between words and images. Now working on their second book together, Jin and Lee are set to create another absolute classic. 송유진, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories around the globe. Russian President Vladimir Putin has criticized French President Emmanuel Macron following his warning about the threat Russia poses to France and Europe. In a televised address on Wednesday evening, Macron described Russia as a direct threat to Europe. He also announced his decision to open a strategic debate on nuclear deterrence to protect European allies, adding that France must be prepared for the possibility that the United States may no longer stand by its side. In response, Putin on Thursday mocked Macron's remarks by drawing a comparison to Napoleon Bonaparte's failed attempt to conquer Russia in 1812. The Kremlin also denounced Macron's speech as highly confrontational, accusing him of wanting the war in Ukraine to continue. Over in Switzerland, a planned conference on the application of the Geneva Conventions to the occupied Palestinian territories was cancelled just one day before it was scheduled to take place. Switzerland announced the cancellation on Thursday, citing a lack of participants after some countries expressed concerns. The Swiss government had invited 196 signatories of the Geneva Conventions to attend the March 7th meeting in Geneva, which aimed to discuss the situation of civilians in the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. The conference was set to focus on the Fourth Geneva Convention, which outlines humanitarian protections for civilians in conflicts or occupied territories. Israel, one of the signatory states, did not immediately comment on the cancellation. However, it had previously criticized the conference, calling it part of the legal warfare against Israel. A lunar lander developed by U.S. space exploration company Intuitive Machines touched down on the moon on Thursday local time, but its success remains uncertain. The U.S. company said it is unclear whether the Athena lander had touched down upright near the lunar south pole or had tipped over, as happened to its first lander last year. This marks the second moon landing under NASA's commercial lunar delivery program. Last Sunday, another Texas-based company, Firefly Aerospace, successfully landed its Blue Ghost lander on the northeastern edge of the near side of the moon. In Brazil, carnival fever has once again swept through Rio de Janeiro. Starting on the last day of February, hundreds of street parties known as blocos paraded through the city streets with unique themes and musical styles. The lively celebrations attracted thousands of revelers. The highlight of Carnival was the fierce competition among the top 12 samba schools at the Samba Drum Stadium. After a thrilling performance, the Beija Flor Samba School was crowned the winner for the 15th time, and the results announced Wednesday. The festive will continue until Saturday. Yoon Se-young, Arirang News.
The morning started chilly, but daytime temperatures rose to double digits across the country, feeling like early spring. It's going to get warmer day by day. Seoul will rise up to 11 degrees Celsius tomorrow and 12 degrees on Sunday. It will feel warm enough to enjoy outdoor activities. However, as the morning temperature stays in single digits, please keep in mind the daily temperature differences. With the warmer weather, the air is covered with fine dust. While the concentration of ultrafine dust has risen to bad levels in the western regions, caution is necessary as it is likely to continue for a long time during the weekend and next week. Looking at the lows, Seoul and Daejeon will start off at 2 degrees tomorrow morning. Highs will exceed 11 degrees all over the country, and it will even be a bit warmer on Sunday. There's rain forecast for Chungcheongnam-do province, southern regions, and Jeju Island tomorrow. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Right, those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up now is our daily panel session. Do stay with us.